What are two main takeaways from the Democratic National Convention so far?
Well, from me, it may not be other takeaways, but what was conspicuous is the absence of the word justice as opposed to freedom or any other words. Our founding fathers said that the end of civil government, end of civil society was justice. And that includes everyone, including those babies and incubators dying in Gaza. So we conspicuously didn't see the understanding of justice, letting every person's station in life correspond to their character and abilities. The second thing that came away is certainly the element on unity, but I think they airbrushed out things that should be of concern to Americans. One, our unconditional supply of weapons to Israel being used to commit genocide and war crimes and otherwise in Gaza, in the West Bank. And there's not a word about that at all at the convention. There's still no explanation of how we're going to be repaying a $50 trillion national debt in another decade, where our children and children's children are going to be saddled with a bankrupt nation. The spending is out of control. We don't have a disciplined politics that imposes taxes commensurate to the spending. And we're going off a financial cliff. And neither party wants to say anything about, well, if you're a family, how can you be in debt $50 trillion and think you can survive? So it's just another example, I believe, and I'm not trying to suggest the Democrats are any less culpable than the Republicans, just ignoring reality and the hard choices that have to be made.
Right. So how does the RNC, or the Republican National Convention, compare to the Democratic National Convention? You watched both of them so far. What's your take?
Well, I think that was quite foolish, because I think the RNC convention is focused on negative. If you try to sell life insurance as death insurance, you're not going to get any buyers. And the Republicans, including Mr. Trump, and I think it would be more efficient if Mr. Clinton said he's a narcissist, a super narcissist, with fewer words to describe his character. It was all about all these terrible people. They're trying to destroy XYZ. There's very little positive in the Republican National Convention other than to try to destroy other people's lives, the cat ladies, and they hate other people if they enjoy themselves. Now, there's some people who get some kind of, I feel, adolescent gratification out of trying to be negative. But I think the Republican National Convention was not a success. But we'll just see whether or not you can get the turnout on the Democratic side. But I think the real pathology of the countries, neither party is addressing. We're going bankrupt, and we cannot and will not police the world, and we're ignoring all the miseries we're inflicting abroad by having unconditional warfare as our foreign policy.
So how do you think Tim Walz did in trying to make his case for the vice presidential role to the American people?
Well, the one thing you need to remember, it's very rare for a vice president to have any impact on a presidential decision whatsoever. Hewitt Humphrey had no impact on the LBJ. One of FDR's, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's vice president, said it wasn't worth a bucket of warm spit. So vice presidents, because there's very, very aggressive exclusion from the West Wing from the vice president's staff, they really are very, very unlikely to have any influence at all. If you ask Kamala Harris, or whatever the influences she had on Joe Biden's decision, I don't know whether you can have any. I remember when President Dwight Eisenhower was president and Richard Nixon, as vice president, was running for nomination in 1960. They asked Mr. Eisenhower, well, what was Mr. Nixon's influence on your administration? He said, give me 2 or 3 weeks, maybe I can find something about it. So I think it's more optics than anything else. I've really never encountered a voter who said, my vote really turned on the vice president rather than the president. So it's just the optics.